All right, and we back on the forecast. So recently, Judge Sessions decided to close the case of Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. He was a 68-year-old brother with heart conditions who was shot and killed by police in his own home in White Plains, New York, around the time that Trayvon Martin got murdered. Now let's see what could justify the murder of a senior citizen brother in his own home by the police.
Breaking news tonight, federal prosecutors say that they're going to launch a criminal investigation of the white police officer who shot and killed this man, Kenneth Chamberlain Sr., an African-American retired Marine, inside his own home last November. The federal investigation comes on the heels of a grand jury's decision not to indict the officer. The grand jury's ruling yesterday left many people shaking their heads and many others, including Chamberlain's family, demanding answers. What they want to know is why police officers in White Plains, New York, who were dispatched in the early hours of a November morning to help Mr. Chamberlain, ended up killing him. Just after 5 a.m., Vietnam vet Kenneth Chamberlain, a 68-year-old African-American man with a severe heart condition, sets off his medical alert device.
Mr. Chamberlain, this is your help center for Life Aid. Do you need an ambulance, sir?
The operator attempts to talk to him on a two-way speaker in his home.
Mr. Chamberlain, I'm not getting a response. I'm going to notify someone to come by and help you now.
Emergency personnel are dispatched to his apartment to check on him. By 5:30, White Plains police officers are the first to arrive. Chamberlain is now alert and sounds agitated.
I have the White Plains Police Department banging on my door, and I did not call them, and I am not sick.
Everything's all right, sir?
No, it's not all right. I need help. The White Plains Police Department are banging on my door.
Over the next 40 minutes, officers repeatedly try to get him to open the door.
I'm okay. I need to see that you're okay. Now we'll go. No, you leave. Can't leave. You leave. You called us. I can't leave.
Others arrive, including medical personnel and Chamberlain's niece, who also lives in the building.
I don't even think they cared about me because they didn't even acknowledge me.
At 6:13, police turn on a taser, which records this video.
Mr. Chamberlain, leave. I can't leave. We got to check you out. Leave and put the knife down. Put the knife down.
Police say he had a butcher's knife in his hand that he stuck through a crack in the door.
Put the knife down and step away from the door. Now I'm not asking you, I'm telling you.
Another officer is now standing outside a window in Chamberlain's first-floor apartment. The district attorney has confirmed that in a section of the tape not given to CNN, an officer calls Mr. Chamberlain the N-word. Meanwhile, police inside the building are using bolt cutters to get into Chamberlain's apartment. They believe he's used a chair to block the door. At 6:41, more than an hour after they arrived, police finally get Chamberlain's door open. They say he's waving a butcher's knife above his head, and they tase him. Seconds later, they tase him again. At this point, police turn off the taser camera. This is the last image we have of Kenneth Chamberlain alive. Police say he continued to come at them with a knife, so they shot him with several beanbags from a shotgun. Police say when that didn't stop him, one officer had fired his pistol twice. One bullet hit Chamberlain in the lung, killing him. At 7:09 a.m., just about 2 hours after a medical alert dispatcher calls to see if the former Marine is okay, Kenneth Chamberlain is pronounced dead.
So this elder, Kenneth Chamberlain Sr., who is also a vet who served in Vietnam, because we know how much America loves its veterans, was in his own home sleeping when he accidentally pressed the life alert. So when the operator tried to talk to him and he didn't respond, she called for the paramedics. Then at about 5 o'clock in the morning, that's when White Plains police officers, including Anthony Carelli and Steven Hart, showed up. Now, this brother told the police at least 60 times that he was okay, he wanted them to leave, and that everything is all right. Even the Life Aid operator tried to call and cancel. But the police insisted and tried for over an hour to get into his apartment. They were screaming at him to open the door, and when he said, "I'm just a sick old man," Officer Steven Hart replied, "We don't give a fuck, nigger." Now, after an hour of this, the police finally kicked the door down, knocked it off the hinges, and they claim he had a knife, so they tased him 2 times, then shot him 4 times with a beanbag gun, beat him with a baton. And after all that, Officer Anthony Carelli said this 68-year-old superhuman was still attacking him with a knife, so he was forced to shoot him 2 times in the chest. Now, mind you, the police were on a call from Life Alert, and it ends up with them shooting a 68-year-old man dead. And while they were supposed to be investigating the case, they were already justifying it.
They had come to treat for a medical emergency.
Investigative reporter Jim Hoffer is here now with the new details on the story he broke last night at 11. Jim.
Bill and Liz, the family is stepping up pressure tonight on the district attorney in Westchester County, saying video and audio the DA has obtained show police should be indicted for the fatal shooting of their father. Family and friends stood outside the offices of the Westchester County District Attorney's Office this afternoon, demanding a thorough, unbiased grand jury investigation of the fatal shooting by police of Kenneth Chamberlain.
We're giving Ms. DeFiore's office an opportunity to do the right thing by this family. But I assure you, if it is not done, if there is not an indictment, then we will proceed to the U.S. Attorney's Office to demand a civil rights investigation of this city.
3 months ago, White Plains police responded to a medical alert call that the 68-year-old had accidentally pressed while sleeping. Upon arriving, police claimed they heard an emotionally disturbed Chamberlain screaming inside the apartment, and at one point, they say, he pulled out a knife. Here's how police back then described what happened next.
The officers first used an electronic taser, which was discharged, hit the victim, and had no effect. While the officers were retreating, the officers then used a shotgun, a beanbag shotgun.
Seconds later, police shot and killed Chamberlain. A warranted use of deadly force, they insist. But as we reported last night, audio and video are raising serious questions about the police version of events, according to the family and their attorneys, who recently were allowed to listen and view it.
Did I see anything in the video that would warrant their action? Not at all. My father, when the door was busted down, he was about 8 to 10 feet away from him with his hands down to his side. That's not an aggressive act.
If you are in your home and you are sleeping at 5 o'clock in the morning and law enforcement comes on a medical call, you should not have your door broken down and you should not end up dead.
The district attorney's office says in the coming weeks, the video and audio tapes, along with all other evidence, will be presented to a Westchester County grand jury. The son, who has already seen some of that evidence, swears it is proof police used excessive force.
I'm asking that these police officers be brought up on criminal charges.
Police have declined to answer any of our questions about the shooting while it is under investigation. We also requested a copy of the initial incident report through Freedom of Information. Police have also denied that request.
The family is asking for a fair and unbiased investigation. Meanwhile, the police are doing everything they can to protect their own. For 5 months, they did everything they can to protect the name of those police officers until somebody finally leaked the name to the media. Even then, they tried to do everything they could to stop it. And when we finally get their names, we find out they have a history of violence and racism.
The beleaguered White Plains Police Department has been given another black eye today as it's revealed the officer who used a racial slur on the morning Kenneth Chamberlain was killed has never been disciplined.
He's tapping on the window and you hear him say, Mr. Chamberlain, stop. We have to talk. And, I mean, it's as clear as a bell that the N-word came right out of this officer's mouth.
It's a travesty. Commissioner Chong should be held accountable, because he should have disciplined him immediately when they found out who was the officer that called Mr. Chamberlain the N-word.
The offensive language came from White Plains police officer Steven Hart, according to the district attorney's transcripts. And he's also facing a federal civil rights lawsuit for unlawfully arresting this man, slamming his head to the ground, breaking his nose, and injuring his arm. The Chamberlain's family attorney says it shows a culture of tolerance for racism and brutality in White Plains.
It's really troubling that in 2012, the City of White Plains apparently sees fit to hire and retain officers who are alleged to brutalize, falsely arrest suspects, and kill them without cause, and use racial slurs.
The mayor has not stepped in and called the management accountable for the action of their officers and the action of management.
Well, a grand jury is still considering murder charges in Chamberlain's death against Officer Anthony Carelli, who fired the 2 fatal shots, and Officer Hart. Others from their unit are being called to testify as well. When asked about policies prohibiting the use of slurs or punishment by the White Plains PD, they would only say they cooperated fully with the Westchester County District Attorney's investigation. Now, the police department refused to answer our questions, including, is there a policy against using racial slurs? What is the punishment? And is Hart still patrolling the neighborhood where so many heard him use this language before Chamberlain was fatally shot?
These 2 cops beat up 2 brothers, called them raghead, and they were already facing a $10 million lawsuit. Now, despite all of this evidence, the police department, the police union, they all continue to back these police officers. Even though this brother's hands was at his side, even when the autopsy showed he wasn't even facing the officers, even when the coroner said he couldn't have been holding a knife, they still stuck by the police officer's story. They continued to stand up for all of these police officers. Now, Officer Anthony Carelli didn't go to trial because a grand jury refused to indict him. Then a federal jury rejected a civil suit against Officer Anthony Carelli and the City of White Plains after the judge refused to allow evidence of racial slurs or Carelli's past.
For months, the family of Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. was asking the police department in White Plains to release the name of the officer who fatally shot and killed the man inside his White Plains apartment here. And the police department blocked them at every turn. Today, it was leaked to the media, along with the devastating news that he is also facing trial for assaulting a man and using racial epithets years ago, leaving the family to wonder, could his death have been prevented?
I want to cry at 1 minute, but then I'm angry because I'm saying these are people who are supposed to be coming to assist him and help him, but instead they ended up killing him.
Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. reacts to the news that Anthony Carelli is the officer who shot and killed his unarmed father in his home. And he's also headed to trial for excessive force in arresting 2 brothers and using racial epithets.
He should have been on a modified duty based upon this federal lawsuit, which includes brutality.
Chamberlain's attorneys had demanded White Plains police identify Carelli after he killed the 68-year-old Marine last November, but they were denied for more than 4 months.
That's something that they should have done on their own. Unfortunately, it came as a result of great investigative work from the media.
It was leaked to the media, and White Plains PD confirmed the shooter is 29-year-old Officer Anthony Carelli, who lives here in Harrison with his parents. Carelli is also one of 10 defendants named in a civil rights lawsuit for arresting and beating the Hattar brothers, 27-year-old twins. This is a picture of Jerry after he was brutalized. The suit alleges Carelli kicked, struck, and beat them while they were handcuffed and used racial epithets, calling them ragheads.
Officer Carelli used excessive force and, beat upon my clients and violated his civil rights.
This comes as the Westchester DA is preparing to bring charges before a grand jury for Carelli's role in shooting and killing Chamberlain Sr. after audio and videotapes of the killing were reviewed.
You hear the expletive saying, "I don't give a F," then use the N-word and tell them to open the door.
I see them opening a door, and I see Mr. Chamberlain, a 68-year-old man with a heart condition, standing in his house with his arms at his side, no shirt on, and boxer shorts on.
An officer can be heard saying, "Turn it off." And that's when Carelli fired the 2 fatal shots at Kenneth Chamberlain, ending his life. Officer Carelli faces numerous trials, coming up first in front of a grand jury to see whether or not he'll be indicted on any murder charges in the death of Chamberlain. Then later in the month, he goes on federal trial for violating civil rights.
And now, U.S. Attorney Joon Kim has announced no civil rights charges will be filed either. He said that Officer Carelli believed that Sergeant Martin was in danger of being seriously injured by Mr. Chamberlain. The investigation revealed no evidence to refute Officer Carelli's testimony that he shot Mr. Chamberlain in response to his belief that Sergeant Martin was in danger of being seriously physically injured by Mr. Chamberlain, and that shooting this elder in his own home while on a life alert call was completely justified. To tase him, beat him with a baton, shoot him with a beanbag gun wasn't enough. You had to shoot him in the chest in order to stop this old man who had a knife that the coroner said is no way he could have had it. None of this is no surprise. It doesn't matter if you're a senior citizen. It doesn't matter if you're a man. It doesn't matter if you're a woman. It doesn't matter if you're rich. It doesn't matter if you're poor. They will still justify it. This man was a vet who fought in Vietnam. But I don't see the support our troops crowd standing up for this man. At the end of the day, unless you have an army that could back up what you say, and that can enforce punishment for murdering one of our people, then we're going to be stuck in the same position. Asking and begging these people for fairness and for justice is falling on deaf ears. We are all we got, and we are the only ones that can change it.
I tell people, good, bad, or indifferent. My father loved me, I loved him. I did plenty of things that he didn't agree with, that he would really get on me about. But one thing that I can always say is that no matter what I went through, my father supported me, he encouraged me, he let me find my way.
This is your help center for Life Aid. Kenneth, do you need help? Mr. Chamberlain, you pressed your medical button. Do you need help? Mr. Chamberlain, I'm not getting a response. I'm going to notify someone to come by and help you now.
White Plains Police Officer Cianci.
Good morning. This is Life Aid reporting a medical alert.
Medical alert?
Yes. This is your help center for Life Aid. Mr. Chamberlain, do you need help?
Yes, this is an emergency. I have the White Plains Police Department banging on my door, and I did not call them, and I am not sick.
Sir, I'm attempting to cancel a dispatch for Kenneth Chamberlain at 135 South Lexington.
They're gonna make entry anyway.
I am not opening the door for them.
They just want to make sure you're okay.
They're trying to hurt me to murder me.
They're not going to hurt you, sir.
I know I'm going to get hurt. I know that. I know I'm going to get hurt. You're not here to help hurt me. You're going to kill me, huh? You're going to beat my motherfucking ass. I'm a 68-year-old man with heart trouble, and you're going to beat me. Oh, you got your gun ready. Oh, they got your shotgun, y'all. They can fight that on too, huh? They have stun guns and shotguns at the ready. They have their locked out. They're planning on taking me to the White Plains Police Department and beat me and then kill me. I want you to guys. If you guys go alone, leave it alone. Open up. Leave it alone. Open up. Leave my house. Leave my home. Don't do that, sir. Don't do that. Don't do that, officer. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Do not do that. I'm telling you I'm okay. They're taking the hinges off the door. They're getting ready to break through. I hear you. They're breaking through. They're breaking through, Mr. President. They're breaking through. I'm outnumbered and I can't hold them. They're taking the hinges off. They're breaking the door. They're getting ready to come in. They're getting ready to come in.
Pickens Police Chief Tommy Ellenberg handed in his gun and badge tonight, tendering his resignation after city officials say he used the N-word on 2 separate occasions.
Tonight we hear from both sides, those who support the chief and those who demanded his dismissal. News 4's Mandy Gaither is live and local on the story from our Anderson newsroom. And Mandy, the chief, well, his resignation is effective immediately, right?
Well, that's right, Michael, and I tried to get in touch with Tommy Ellenberg, but no one answered his door. Neighbors said it just wasn't a good time to try to talk to him. He looked very upset as he walked out of council chambers during their closed executive session, and minutes later we learned Ellenberg is no longer chief.
The yeses have it, and we have accepted Chief Ellenberg's resignation.
With a 3-2 vote, Pickens City Council accepted Chief Tommy Ellenberg's resignation, effective immediately.
It's a sad time in Pickens right now. No one wins in this. I just think for the police force to be effective and continue serving the people, that it was best that Mr. Ellenberg resign.
Councilman Fletcher Perry, along with Patrick Lark and Carlton Hawley, voted to accept the resignation, while Councilman Tommy Stevens and Mayor David Owens voted against it.
And I hate something like this is bringing a good man down.
Y'all stop. That's enough. That's enough. Y'all going to get out if y'all want to keep it up.
Tension was felt in the Pickens City Hall lobby as supporters of Ellenberg and those who wanted his resignation had words with one another.
We didn't call the National Guard. They called the NAACP.
Well, sir, that's all right. Let's just...
It was the Pickens County NAACP president, Sheila Crawford, who asked for the special called meeting with council and asked for Ellenberg's dismissal.
The N-word should not be in the mindset of the police chief. For what is in the heart will come out.
But there was plenty of support for Ellenberg as well. Some painted their cars while others posted signs hoping Ellenberg would keep his job. In fact, City Administrator Catherine Brackett says her police force may soon be smaller.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if a few officers resign by tomorrow morning. He has an immense amount of support, contrary to what former ex-officers have said here. His department is hurt, and I think we might have some more resignations tomorrow.
Assistant Chief Rodney Gregory will now be acting chief. As for Ellenberg, council voted to continue paying his insurance for 8 months at a cost of about $400 a month, and he'll be paid his general leave balance for his vacation and sick time, which is about $13,000, according to the administrator.
An elected official refusing to step down after making a racist remark. His name is Robert Copeland, and he's a member of the Police Commission in Wolfboro, New Hampshire.
Recently, a resident overheard him using a racist term to describe President Obama, and as New Hampshire Bureau Chief Michael Rosenfield shows us tonight, Copeland admits he said it.
Wolfboro residents packed a police commissioners meeting on Thursday, many demanding the resignation of Robert Copeland, one of the 3 elected members of the Police Commission.
I find that Commissioner Copeland's comments in public appalling for a public official.
The controversy stems from an encounter here at Nolan's Bistro in downtown Wolfboro. Town resident Jane O'Toole says she was wrapping up a meal when she overheard Copeland use the N-word about President Obama.
I brushed by him. I couldn't hold myself back, and I said, "Is someone here tossing around the N-word?" And he rose up, turned around, and said, "Yeah." So I just said, not good, and walked out of the restaurant.
O'Toole wrote a letter to the local paper and then received an email from Copeland which said, in part, "I believe I did use the N-word in reference to the current occupant of the White House. For this, I do not apologize. He meets and exceeds my criteria for such." Whitney White is one of the town's few minority residents.
And if you feel that way, great. I'm all about freedom of speech, but then don't represent the public that way.
Police Chief Stuart Chase says the commission is responsible for hiring and firing department employees, and while he calls the comments unacceptable, he says Copeland has done a lot of good for the community.
He has donated time, energy, resources to this town in a multitude of capacities that no one will ever know about.
Copeland was just re-elected to a 3-year term in March.
So what's your business with me right now?
I want to find out who you are and what the problem was back
There is no
national
problem.
league.
That's the thing.
So talk to me, let me know
and
who
let you
are,
know.
and you can be on your way.
Why do I have to let you know who I am? Who I am isn't
because
the problem.
that's what police do when they get called.
Well, I don't have to let you.
People.
Well, I know my rights, first off. Secondly, I don't have to let you know who I am if I haven't broken any laws. I told him, I'm going to New Horizons to pick up my kids at 10 o'clock. I was sitting there for 10 minutes. Fully. Like, not before he walked up to me or anything. He walked up to me a minute after and got irate with me. So first off, that's a public area. And if there's no sign that doesn't say this is a private area, you can't sit here, no one can tell me I can't sit there. If that's the case, then I can't sit here. The problem is I'm black. That's the problem. No, it really is, because I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not sitting there with a group of people. I'm sitting there by myself. Not causing a problem with anyone. There isn't a sign that says this is a private area, you can't sit here. Therefore, you cannot tell me I can't sit there if I'm not doing anything wrong. What's going on, brother?
What's going on?
I gotta go get my kids. No. Please don't touch me. Please don't touch me.
You're gonna go to jail then.
No, wait.
You're gonna go to jail.
I'm not doing anything wrong.
Hold on.
Can you please?
I'm not
No, come on, brother.
Hold on, I'm not here to argue. I'm not your brother.
This is assault. Can you please?
Hold on. I'm not here to argue with you.
Wrong, sir.
Put your hands behind your back.
No, can you please
Put
not
your hands
do
behind
this?
your back.
I didn't do anything wrong.
Put your hands behind your back.
Come on, really? I gotta go get my kids.
Put your hands behind your back, otherwise it's gonna get ugly.
What do you need from me?
I told you.
Can you have him let me go?
And identify you so you can settle what happened.
I haven't done anything
wrong.
I
told you what I wanted initially. So we could settle all
Put your hands
this.
behind your back.
Started to.
Right now, I haven't done anything wrong. Please, no, don't do this. Please,
Put your hands behind the program. Put your hands behind your back. Turn around.
Can somebody help me? That's my kids right there. My kids are right there.
Yeah, put your hands behind your back.
Put your hands behind your back. Don't choke me. I have asthma, sir.
Well, you're gonna get
I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything.
You're gonna get tased.
I'm doing. Ow! Get down! I'm not doing anything. Stop, please. Someone help me. Someone please help me. Please help me. Please help me. Can someone please help me? I haven't done anything wrong. Can someone please help me? Really? I haven't done anything wrong.
Just shut down for a little bit.
President Trump this day is issuing an executive order that will make it easier to protect yourselves and your communities. He is rescinding restrictions from the prior administration that limited your agency's ability to get equipment through federal programs, including life-saving gear. Equipment like helicopters, armed vehicles are vitally important to emergency and disaster response efforts. One sheriff told me earlier this year about how, due to prior administration restrictions, the federal government made his department return an armored vehicle that can change the dynamics in an active shooter situation. These are the types of helmets and gear that stopped a bullet and saved the life of an officer during the Orlando nightclub shooting. This is the type of equipment officers needed when they pursued and ultimately killed terrorists in San Bernardino. Studies have shown that this equipment reduces crime rates, reduces the number of assaults against police officers, and actually reduces the number of complaints against police officers. These restrictions that had been opposed went too far. We will not put superficial concerns above public safety. We will do our best to get you what you need. The executive order that the President will sign today will ensure that you can get the life-saving gear you need to do your job and send a strong message that we will not allow criminal activity, violence, and lawlessness to become a new normal. And we will save taxpayer money in the process. There's not a dollar to waste, and we're not going to waste dollar. We're not going to allow equipment no longer needed to be sitting idle when you could be using it.